All right. I want to thank everybody for showing up. Looks like we have 13 participants, live participants. Hello, everybody. Thank you for making it out. Thank you, Linda and her team. I know Wanda I spoke with for putting this all together. And I'm very excited to be sharing this material with you today. All right, so let's get right into it. First, I want to share a bit about me. If we could go to the next slide. Thank you. Astrology is not where I thought I would be. When I was growing up, I thought I'd always be a businessman, entrepreneur, someone successful. I worked on Wall Street for 10 years. And kind of by accident, through like a horrific accident, I was run over by my father in a car accident that led me to not being able to reclaim my place in the world and the path that I was going on. And I started seeking out alternative methods of healing. Like I got into acupuncture, and then acupuncture got me into meditation. Then I got into metaphysics. Then I bought my first tarot deck, and I was shocked that I could read tarot. And then I started studying astrology to learn to do my tarot better. And then I realized, wow, I'm really good at the astrology. And the astrology, it can be much more accurate and specific with time and how to do things. So I kind of went that way. I'm still a very good tarot reader. I enjoy doing it very much. But astrology seems to be more of my passion. It seems to be a bit more respectable for a Capricorn like me. And my approach to reading charts is kind of a humanistic approach where character builds the destiny and not the transits. It's working with the transits. It's challenging to work with the outer transits, applying to us personally, like a Uranus to any personal planet, Pluto to any personal planet could be absolutely devastating. And Saturn is the mediating force for us to be able to work with all these outer planets. He mediates between the unseen and the seen worlds. And so I'm very excited to be sharing this about Saturn because I feel all that has happened in my life, you know, being almost eaten by my father with this car accident. I've got a lot to share. So I'd like to start with a story, a different story. It's a story about a startup teacher of, let's say, higher wisdom, higher philosophy, in long time ago in a place called Galilee. And this guy he made his own rules. He went against what the teachers of the law were saying and said, you know what, I'm going to heal people on the Sabbath, which is Saturn's day. And why? Because if a sheep is lost, I'm going to help find them. That's what I do. And they pretty much condemned him to death at that moment. And the Pharisees, the teachers of those days, the authorities, the religious teachers, the dogmatic priesthood, said to him something like something about not following Moses's law and following his own law and his own authority. And it's because, you know, Jesus, the teacher that I'm referring to, embodied the Saturn archetype. He's like, I'm going to be Saturn and bring heaven to earth. And actually, I was just reading in a book too, this is interesting, that Sigmund Freud wrote a book on Moses, and Moses was actually kind of condemned to the same fate as Jesus. Like there's some evidence on that. And there was a point I wanted to make here. I just want to make sure I make it before going on. That, you know, and these laws that Moses did at the time were very basic. You know, they were 4,000, 6,000 years ago, whenever the law, the 10 Commandments were put onto the tablets, that it was different times. It was, people were more savage. They were less evolved than they are now. And, you know, as students of evolutionary astrology, we always got to take into account that man or woman is always evolving and growing. And we've got to apply these ancient sources of wisdom contemporarily and not anachronistically, because that's going against Saturn and not working with him. All right, that's the point I wanted to make. If we go to the next slide. Okay, So we're going to lay this out. We're going to talk about Sagittarius, talk about what Saturn means, talk about what Saturn means in Sagittarius, which I've kind of alluded to, gave a preview of what my view on it is, and then Saturn in the houses, and we're going to get to chart examples. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have enough time to do 12 chart examples, so we're going to do 4 on Saturn and the angles. All right, next slide, please. All right, Saturn, I like to think of, or sorry, not Saturn, Sagittarius, I like to think of the houses or the wheel as a self-teaching organism, meaning that if you study the wheel, that the wheel could reveal more knowledge to itself. You know, that's saying a lot there, and let's go through a practical example of how that works. Sagittarius is the 2nd house from the 8th house. So after death and transformation, we have morality and we have wisdom that we went through. We've been drugged through the underworld, and we have something to teach about it. We have something to share about our experience, much like I was sharing my own experience being dragged through the underworld with my healing experience and transformative experience. And out of that, we derive morality, optimism, and a philosophy that create the structure and laws within that are the backbone of a society in Capricorn. And the 12th house from Sagittarius is also Scorpio. If you want to think about it from a 12th house perspective, that the morals and the laws of society are what's hidden from them are the taboos of society. And the taboos of society are what make it sacred. And if you look to Scorpio, we have sex, death, taxes, and the occult. You know, these are very sacred things. We make laws to protect people against death and to preserve life. We make laws that honor sex within a marriage, things like that. And an example of, you know, when we travel to foreign lands, we don't always know the taboos of the cultures that we travel to. Like, for example, if you ever try to go into a nightclub in New York, if you wear Timberlands and, like, let's say a hat, that's like code for you're an urban individual who's a troublemaker. And if you go to Bali, that same symbol for an urban individual that made trouble is actually a bintang t-shirt. And this is where, like, all the Australian hooligans wear when they go out clubbing in Bali. And one of my friends who's from San Francisco went out to a nightclub in Bali, and he didn't know that. He just thought the shirt was cool, and they kicked him out. And they looked at him like he was out to start trouble. Because that was the taboo, that bintang t-shirt. You know, in Sagittarius, we have the symbols, certain symbols of and meanings and beliefs about people. And on the quote that when I started this, the Wild Horses quote from Mick Jagger. If you listen to the Wild Horses lyrics, it's like the perfect metaphor, I think, for Saturn and Sagittarius, that let's do some living after we die. So right there, he's talking about Sagittarius. Then he's talking about how wild horses can't drag me away. Where, you know, Sagittarius is the symbol of, we have the centaur, the horses, that these horses can't pull us away. And Saturn is that anchoring that the wild horses can't pull away. It's our moral ground, our moral high ground. And also one other point to think about Sagittarius, if we follow the wheel, that after we go out of Scorpio, you know, in the traditional wheel, which still has some value in my view, my practice, that we get into the social planet. So Sagittarius is the first social sign, where man or woman refines and releases their selfish desire nature and transmutes it to higher level. And that's a lot, but what does that mean practically? It means that our desire, we turn it into aspiration for a greater social good. And we could see that playing out on the wheel, where, we start, Mars is the ruler of Aries. Saturn is in fall. Mars and Saturn both are not comfortable in Cancer. In Libra, when man starts to get more socialized in Libra, Mars is in fall. He's uncomfortable. That selfish desire part of ourselves, that part that wants to assert themselves as a separate individual from their society, and Saturn's exalted. But in Capricorn, the culmination of, or perfection of human beings, Saturn is Lord and ruler, and Mars is exalted. And Sagittarians and Capricornians are both very ambitious, but in different ways. And I don't know if you could say from an evolutionary perspective that Capricorns in a previous incarnation were Sagittarians, or how that works, but it just plays out practically in conversation that way. I was sitting at a table, I think a weekend or two ago, and there was 2 Capricorns, me and another Capricorn on one side, and 2 Sagittarians on the other side of the table. And and I said to him, I'm like, Capricorns and Sagittarians are both very socially driven, but Capricorns are more hesitant because they know that when they achieve that goal and they get that promotion, how much work there'll be. So they know, where Sagittarians will just go and leap first, where Capricorns know, all right, if I get that promotion, I'm going to have work and I'm going to have less time on my hands, and I know how valuable my time is. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. Oh, and one other point on Sagittarius too, the centaur, where we have that animal-like consciousness within ourselves we're finding, the beast. We have the half horse, where we're wild, but also man, where we're learning how to use our higher abstract meaning-making machine, and the higher mind. That's an important one. Okay. All right, so Saturn. I talked about it in my story. What kind of got me into astrology is that I'm a Capricorn, and Saturn eats his own children. So when I first sat down for my first reading, I'm like, oh, wow, there's something for here. I can make meaning out of my pain and horrific experience, because there's perhaps something I could teach to other people here. There's something for me, that perhaps this is part of a plan that I just don't understand yet. And across spiritual tradition, Saturn is known as the greatest planet. I love this book. Let's see if I can access it quickly from my traveling library. Should have had it handy, forgive me. Here it is. We see it, there we go. The Greatness of Saturn. If you want to learn about Saturn, this is such a good book. It comes from the Vedic tradition, but the myths are just so powerful. And right now Saturn's in Jupiter's house, and Jupiter in Vedic astrology is known as the guru. And there's a story in that book about when Saturn goes to afflict the guru's moon, and the guru is bargaining with Saturn, and he talks down a 7.5-year affliction period, which I forget the name. I think it's called like a sati sate. That's like a Vedic technique. He talks down a 7.5-year period because he's Saturn's guru at all. And, you got to have love for the guru. That into like a few hours. But within the few hours, that guru almost gets decapitated. And you think about just how powerful that is, especially when you think of the transits of Saturn and Jupiter conjunctions. From, I think, Abraham Lincoln to Ronald Reagan, there's been a presidential assassination every 20 years. And it goes back to this violent myth of eating your own children and then rebelling against the authority to become your own authority. And it's like I don't remember the exact quote from this great author, Nassim Taleb. He wrote Anti-Fragile. And there he talks about regicide as a system purging cathartic process. It's quite violent, but he makes his point very well. But after Jupiter or the Guru's moon is done being afflicted for that few hour period, he bows down on his knees and he says to Saturn, "You are truly the greatest of all planets." Saturn's teacher bows to him because, Saturn is the great teacher. He teaches us in a different way than Jupiter. He teaches us by showing us what we're not supposed to do, where we think we're being limited, but we're actually we're going out of bounds or out and wasting our time doing something. When you're experiencing a Saturn transit, the mantra to cultivate within yourself is, be grateful for delays. You're stuck in traffic. Do you have time to be efficient? Use your time efficiently while you're stuck. And it's kind of a hint of why Saturn is, what's the word? Enjoy in the 12th house, the house of confinement and prisons, because it's in this sort of confined situation where we could see ourselves. And what Saturn wants to teach us is, got a lot to say here, okay. Mastery of the physical world is what he ultimately wants to teach us, so that we could learn how to work with the unseen realms. That in my opening talk, or my opening part of this, where Jesus was mentioning about where you could be of the kingdom of heaven, and in Greek, heaven is actually Oranos, and Oranos is Greek was the language that the New Testament was written in. Okay. And in the medieval traditions, Agrippa von Nettesheim, who was a metaphysician, called Saturn the keeper and the discoverer of mysteries. And I don't know how many people have seen the Hamilton play. It's got a very Capricornian theme, but one of the songs that won a Tony was that life doesn't discriminate between the sinners and the saints. And, that's the same with Saturn. If Saturn is going to afflict his own beloved guru for an hour and almost get him beheaded until he learns his lesson, that's Saturn. He doesn't discriminate between the sinners and the saints. But there's hope with Saturn, especially in all the change that's happening within our world. Something I was contemplating while preparing for this, Saturn rules lead, which is essentially a worthless metal. And imagine you own a lead farm in wherever lead comes from, a lead mine in the 1930s, and there's only so much you can do with lead. You make pencils and maybe X-ray things, and then the nuclear bomb is invented. With the discovery of Pluto. And all of a sudden, the price of lead just goes through the roof. And you're like, wow. And right now, the direction the world's going, it's very important that we anchor ourselves solidly and we be a responsible member to our society in some way. Because it's what's going to keep us safe, and it's going to be able to work within our limits and then go beyond them. Because there's going to be so much change and upheaval happening. It's all in the transits, with that Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, 2020. And Saturn is also known as the Great Tempter. There's I don't remember this exact quote, but it was told to me something like this by St. Thomas of Aquinas. Satan is in the body. When we surrender to the body, Satan is transformed, or when Satan surrenders to the soul, he is transformed into God's angel. And Aleister Crowley said something similar. He said, I was in a death struggle with self. God and Satan fought for my soul. Those 3 long hours. God conquered. Now I only have one doubt left. Which of the twain was God? All right. Let's go to the next one, please. Okay. Now with Saturn returns this is where every 30 years, Saturn makes a return to the same place within our chart. We're going to go through one chart. It's going to have a Saturn return, it's going to be a pretty intense Saturn return, as we'll discuss. And it's when we become a man or a woman in the universe's eyes. And something Joseph Campbell said was that there aren't many rituals within society, and that's why we have gang initiations. But I don't think that's necessarily true, but perhaps as astrologers, that's all our collective responsibility to show the world that everybody goes through a Saturn transit and they're all hard, and that hardness and tough times could be what bonds us all together and makes us all responsible members within a society. And what that looks like, who knows? You could leave that up to the imagination of the universe. And, you know, in temptations and trials, the progress of a man is measured. In them, opportunity for merit and virtue is made more manifest. That was something St. Francis de Sales said, or Sales. That it's one thing to say to the outer world that we have a high moral viewpoint and that we act of good character, but we never really know until we're tested. And it's going to seem like we're meaningless because, you know, people, the sinners and the saints are both tested. And I was reading last night, if you want to understand a Saturn transit, the book of Ecclesiastes, the one that talks about the time and the place for everything. And I think it was 320 that had something like, you know, God tests man to show him how he's not much different than an animal. And I'm like, wow, that's like so perfect, Saturn and Sagittarius. And then he shows that if you're good or you're bad, that it's all meaningless. And you do that, and out of that meaningless, you make your own meaning. Okay, did we talk about this? Yes. And yeah, and what Jesus was teaching about, you know, the kingdom of heaven is within you, is that your inner world really matters. That, you know, you could act one way in the outer world, but if it's not within your heart, you don't really mean it. If your heart's not pure when it's weighed in the scales of judgment, you're just a hypocrite. And that's what he saw at the time. And he called people out and ended up killing them, but he kind of knew that was going to happen. And right now, in, you know, the Saturn-Jupiter cycle, we have a sextile happening in August. So what I see kind of happening with all this is there's going to be a time for alliances, unlikely alliances that aren't going to be formed that you won't think would happen. Like, for example, like right after I wrote about this, it was like the Amazon and Whole Foods merger happened. So I'm like, oh, you're going to see, and I bet the deal's going to close sometime around then. And, you know, back to the Wild Horses song where they, Mick Jagger says something like, faith may be broken, but I have my freedom, but I don't have much time. All right, let's go to the next slide. So what Saturn in Sagittarius is doing is limiting our faith and optimism and our beliefs. But, you know, Saturn rules the law of economy. And one of the most simple, I was an economics major in school, so I know a little bit about supply and demand. And when we have a low supply, we have a very, very high demand. It just happens. And just the tiniest bit of faith or optimism that we give to somebody is going to spark and light up their days. Like, for example, right before I came in here, I went to cash a check within my bank. I went to deposit a check. And it was kind of it was a pretty big check. And so I said, I got to go to a teller. And the guy's like, no, you can put it right in this machine. I said, are you sure it's big? He said, is it over $1 million? I'm like, well, not this one. And that just a little spark right there inspired me. I'm like, you know what? You're right. I'm due $1 million check. It's going to happen eventually. I don't know how, but it just that little spark of inspiration. It was something that I've been seeking, especially since Saturn's been going through my second house of money. And let's think about, Saturn versus Jupiter transits. They kind of work, they're opposing energies. Saturn is consolidation, contraction, limitation, structure, and Jupiter is expansion, abundance, and like an overflowing zest. And they both act differently by transit. Where Saturn hits a house by transit, it's wow, we're really lacking in that area. When he hits a personal planet, we're really doubly lacking. But where Jupiter does that, we're blessed, we're abundance. But the distinction between the two is that if we work with Saturn's limits, and really all you got to do is just hard work, and in the case with Saturn and Sagittarius, a little bit of faith, it's going to be, you're going to be rewarded with a bigger faith than you had than when Saturn left. It's something that you're going to take with you. But whereas Jupiter leaves Libra, all these opportunities that we have for conversations with our partners, with our enemies, with our adversaries, with our competitors, it's going to go away. And, with Jupiter, like the illusion could be, as the co-ruler of Pisces, that abundance is always going to be there, but not all good things don't last. And, Jupiter, if we don't use it, we lose it. But if Saturn, we use it, we take it with us for the rest of our days. And also, Saturn and Jupiter, they are kind of opposing where, let's say if you do Jupiter before Saturn, you kind of get what is like a young Justin Bieber, where you have all this money, all this wealth, all this abundance, but you have no discipline in how to do it. But if you do Saturn before Jupiter, you can build, but then you could also get comfortable within your own limits. And then you're subject to a revolt by either Jupiter or Uranus, where, I know this from my own life. I kind of like being behind the scenes as an accountant, not being in front of a screen in front of people. It's just very uncomfortable for me. But I know that it's part of what I'm supposed to do. And Jupiter and Uranus were both affecting me at the same time. I got a job last year, and I looked at my transits. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to last till June, but I know I got to do it just to go through the experience. And and one other note about this cycle between Saturn, Jupiter, and Uranus. Jupiter and Uranus, we had creation of two very innovative ideas, because the conjunction was in Aries, where they said they went to ask for forgiveness and not permission by creating two companies that kind of circumvented local government laws. And I'm thinking of Uber and Airbnb, where they just said, oh, we're just going to start driving and we're just going to start renting our apartments and we'll work around the laws later once we build up. And right now, the Jupiter opposition is about to happen, that they have to settle up with these authorities. And, Saturn and Jupiter, we had three conjunctions that we're going to go to. In 1980, it was in Libra, the first time in an air sign. I was actually born right around time of this conjunction, that the internet, or how to communicate on the internet, was invented. I think America Online, like the first idea for it, was inseminated in 1983. And then around 2000, we had the dot-com crash when Saturn and Jupiter went into Taurus, because you're like, all right, we have all these users, but what is it really worth? And they couldn't evaluate. Saturn and Jupiter was all about tangible value in Taurus. But the next cycle is going to be on 0 degrees Aquarius. I mean, there's going to be a bunch. I don't know how many, but the next, for my lifetime at least, and for probably foreseeable future, is going to be all in air and communication. And what I think is going to be answered during this time is what is community worth, and what's the tangible monetization value of a like or a user on an app or social media. Things that we don't know now, and then people with like economics majors like me scratch their head saying, how do you figure out how much a company's worth based on its users? Everybody's just kind of guessing. And I work at my other co-working space right across from the charging bull on Wall Street, and there are so many people in front of that bull, mobbing it up. It reminds me of the days of Moses, and it's like it's quite a sight to see. I can send a picture after. I've got it on my phone. All right, let's go to the next slide, please, Linda. And here is a summary to take home, chew on in your own lives, apply to your own life experience of what Saturn and Sagittarius means. And it kind of sums up in a nice verbiage of what I just talked about. All right, let's go to the next one, please. How are we on time? Oh, well, okay. So what does this all mean? You know, we're being like flat out Saturn and Sagittarius right in our face is foreign immigrant travel ban. You know, what benefits can come from this? I don't know. We're going to be struggle to find meaning, but people are working very hard to find this solution. I guarantee you that. And corporate philosophy matters. I'd love for you guys to do your own research. You know, the Uber CEO, I forget his name, Travis Kalanick, I didn't forget it, I was lying, that his corporate philosophy was not refined corporate philosophy, and he is paying for the price for it. He gets ousted from his own company because he had this wild Sagittarian nature where he's like, all right, I'm going to start my own company and forget what the rules, I'm going to make my own rules, but then he didn't apply it to his own personal nature, and he ended up paying the price for it. But where if you look at a company like Netflix, Netflix is famous for their corporate philosophy. If you look up the Netflix employee values handbook, you could be very inspired from it. It's a great company, and they're just going to continue to grow just by reading that. All right, let's go to the next slide. And here are some distilled takeaways on where we need to cultivate faith in our life on where Saturn's transiting. And since I want to have some time to go through charts, and I think I'll need about 15, 20 minutes, let's go on to the next one. Okay. So we're just going to go over the 4 angular placements because I find that, you know, Saturn, from Aaron Sullivan's great book on Saturn and transits, you know, the angular transits to Saturn are very, very significant. It's kind of like, you know, Stevie Nicks, I was thinking about her song Landslide. You know, like when Saturn hits an angle, it's like a season of our life is shifting. And I did some Googling and Wikipediaing today, and she wrote Landslide when Saturn was making a stationary direct on her, stationary direct on her 4th house cusp, opposing her moon. So, okay, Saturn over the ascendant is a very powerful one, which is what Robin's going through right now. And if Robin's here, I'm going to read through it, and she wants to comment, add any color. We'd love to hear from her. So in Robin's chart, the screen, I got to pull it up over here, a little cover. She's a Jupiterian with Jupiter conjunct the sun. So her work is very important to her. That's what we know about her right away. And, you know, something that happens when Saturn goes over the ascendant is we lose meaning of what we do. So I imagine she's going to be going through some sort of job change now, if she hasn't already. But she's older on in her life, so she's probably been afforded that opportunity to make that change and have that freedom. And what even emphasizes that more is that there's going to be some job change, is that there's or a challenge to meaning getting bogged down in the details. With Jupiter, Sun conjunct in Virgo, straddling the 8th and the 9th house cusp, could get bogged down in the details of work. And there was an eclipse in February at about, I think, 8 degrees Pisces, opposite all that point. So that just highlights and emphasizes that more. She's just going to have faith to do something new and leave behind what she's done, is my interpretation of this. And right now she's probably really feeling it. Saturn's sitting right there, going very, very, very slowly. So he's taking his time, and it's like, although, she's like the minutes and hours she feels are probably some exponent of the minute or hours that other of us are feeling, especially if any of us are going through a Uranus transit. And I kind of see also that there's a very lovely grand water trine. And with Venus, that Venus is speaking to me. I forget where I saw it, and it's not in my notes. It's something about where she does for other people. She's going to have to learn how to take care of herself in that manner. All right, let's go to the Saturn in the 4th house in Alice's chart. All right. And I had a chance to speak with Alice a bit before. We were messaging before. And Alice, you could unmute if you'd like.
Hello.
And Saturn, hello. So Saturn, the first thing I saw when I looked at this chart, I'm like, wow, very heavy 10th house emphasis. The chart ruler, the Sun, and a retrograde Venus, and Chiron, also in the 10th. And, Saturn going over the 4th is building a foundation in the inner world so she can be supported from the inside out.
Very true.
Yep, exactly. And something, in Erin Sullivan's book, she talks about Saturn going over the 4th house, is atonement with the father. And what I noticed about, the 4th house ruler, which the 4th house ruler could be symbolic of the father, it's a fairly unaspected Jupiter. It's got some sesquiquadrate, but, essentially that Jupiter is very lonely. And a question I wrote down to myself before talking with Alice was that, did her father die at a young age? And, Alice it must be because I'm so plutonic. I got Pluto in the 12th house conjunct my Scorpio ascendant. People just tell me these things without me asking them. They just kind of volunteer the information. And she shared with me that when Saturn went over her son, she lost her father, and she didn't know much of her father and what he did.
It was my moon, actually, and that was 2012.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I misinterpreted. Okay. So Saturn going over the moon, you lost a father. So another question I had is, since sudden change of jobs, because when Alice's generation that has this Saturn-Uranus conjunction is in Sagittarius is a conjunction that happens every 40 years, and it's just as powerful as that Saturn and Jupiter conjunction, albeit in a slightly different way. It's a new level of, it's like a new level of social archetypes. Like, I think the previous one before this, I'm trying to think, go back. Like, I got 2 examples in my head. I don't know if they're consecutive. Like Muhammad Ali had this conjunction, and he innovated what the athlete couldn't do within society and couldn't do, especially an athlete of color at that time, speaking out against the Vietnam War, Muslim, and someone else that comes to mind who has this conjunction, a current Saturn Uranus conjunction, is Colin Kaepernick. And Colin Kaepernick has the highest selling, or had the highest selling jerseys, but he can't find the football team because he's a quote unquote a distraction, which is just a code for the inherent racism within the football system. So what did we say about this? And the Saturn transit is learning how to make peace with the father through the relationship. And the other question I had to Alice was, Neptune just passing over the descendant. I'm like, are you getting married? And she is in fact getting married. Do you set your marriage date yet?
I already feel like I'm married. We're probably going to process the paperwork very shortly here since I recently moved to the States, but the marriage will probably be next fall, not this fall, like the actual physical event.
Okay. And I think you got, especially next fall, I think Venus is placed better. Like I know someone that's doing like a traditional October wedding, is like when the sun is in Libra when you want to do it, but Venus is going to be in Virgo. So, and she's already going nuts about the details. I'm like, you got to let those go. But next fall, I think might be a bit better. And especially with Saturn going into Capricorn, better time. And, something that this generation is going to do is what I feel is going to define what the galactic center means maybe on a personal level, because it's such a transpersonal large thing that's like ancient astrologers knew about it. I think it was Lily who said something like the moon is never really void a course in Sagittarius, and one theory or idea behind that is that you've got the galactic center there, and that Saturn Uranus on the galactic center, this is a generation that's going to do very big things that probably we can't even imagine. And Alice, I think, is somebody who could personally embody this archetype because of that moon placement. That moon is you see it's a very tight exact sextile to that conjunction, that very tight conjunction, and she's a Cancer sun, and is learning how to strengthen the inner world where you can't be shaken by anybody. And if you're going to shake up society and systems of belief and create a more organic structure of creativity, you're going to need that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Having Saturn pass over my moon, I feel like it was sort of like a prequel to my Saturn return, especially with the sextile there. And it has been all about emotional fortitude this time around too.
Mm. Yeah, and it's gonna make sense at some point, and I would see it when Saturn goes over Saturn, and probably when Saturn hits and Uranus is going to trine all that. Whatever you're doing now is going to be more solid, and it's going to be sudden.
I hope so. It seems a little slow going at the moment, but I'm counting on it.
Enjoy the downtime, I'd say.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's go to the next chart, which is Olive's chart. All right. Okay. Now, symbolically, if we think about the seventh house cusp, the whole lower hemisphere is our inner world. And how I like to think of the seventh house is it takes 6 signs for us to be able to have a conversation with somebody without being a complete animal. Like, the sixth house is the house of makeovers, and, fifth house is the house of romance. So we need lots of improvements on our romance until we're ready to date somebody. And, with Saturn going over the descendant is involved connecting more to the outer world. And Olive, I see her phone's up. Olive, are you there?
Hi, yeah, I am here.
Okay. Olive, if you just look at her horoscope, she is a very, very, very private person. Like right now, instead of seeing Olive's face, I see a phone icon. And, with Saturn going over the seventh house cusp and sitting stationary on that seventh house cusp for a while, I don't think Olive can hide much anymore. That you're going to be tested with faith and trusting and having faith in other people. And, Saturn's going to put you into situations where you're going to challenge limiting beliefs that you can't be seen and that people don't want to see her and her ideas don't matter. And that's based off of all that 12th house stellium. You know, you've got the chart ruler in the 12th. The sun is in the 12th. The ruler of the 3rd house, so of communication, is in the 12th. And the 12th house ruler is also in the 12th. But, you know, that 7th house ruler seems to be the, I would say with that Jupiter in the 3rd is what gets you into trouble with other people.
You mean, yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I can definitely be outspoken for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And you attract other people who perhaps have strong opinions, and it's got to, you've got to say something because it's just probably so extreme.
Yeah.
And, you know, the more you could go out and trusting people and, you know, playing in that discomfort of, you know, can I really trust this person and, you know, take this person at his word, that's where the growth opportunities are going to be. And, you know, speaking in public and putting your face out there and trusting that the world isn't going to burn you at a stake for being into astrology or tarot.
I don't have none of that, actually. I mean, some of that, like I do think you're accurate in kind of like I need to kind of get out of my comfort zone and kind of go out and be more kind of out there with others, that's for sure. But I'm not, like I would ask the Pope his birth time. I'm not hindered or private or any of that kind of traditional 12th house stuff. So, but I do think that I think you're spot on when you say that I have to kind of go out, because I've kind of been on hermitage for like really the last like 6 years. But I'm definitely not like a private person. I kind of just air my dirty laundry, and I don't have trust issues. Like I don't have any trust issues actually. So that's accurate. But the other stuff, I think you're spot on with needing to kind of get out and go more engaged with others. I think that that's very spot on for sure.
Oh yeah, and I kind of see like that Aquarius moon. You know, you need to go be out.
Yeah, I do, because just I've been on hermitage for so long, and I have a lot of, you know, Saturnian kind of work to do. So it's like I do see like you're spot on when you say that. So I definitely agree with that. I've got to get out and get this show on the road, get some work done.
Yeah, you got time. You know, August, when that stationary direct happens around the eclipse, it's going to be all right. Direct motion.
Yeah, I'm not eclipse. It's fixed grand cross.
Oh yeah, look at that too. Oh yeah, that's a.
Yeah, it'll trigger my grand cross on the 3rd.
And Jupiter too.
Yeah.
So something good is going to happen. You know, eclipse or you'd think, you know, traditionally, that's my impression. Yeah, it seems like something good. I feel comfortable saying that.
Did you say something good?
Yeah.
I'm super doomy and gloomy, so. But I hope you're right. From your lips to God's ears, yeah.
Yeah.
But
all right. Okay, let's go on to the last. Thank you. My pleasure. Okay, Lauren's chart. And is Lauren here? I'm guessing no. Okay. I don't see your pop-up. Okay. So Saturn over the midheaven. So what do we have in this chart? Okay, so Saturn co-rules this horoscope with Aquarius rising. So we've got to kind of calculate that in, which is a bit complicated, but you just got to blend both of them into the overall picture. And let's see, Saturn covered. So Saturn going over the midheaven is owning your authority and place within the world. And if you're not, you're going to be very burdened. And if you do, you're going to be very burdened. But if you do own your place in the world and your authority, you're at least going to be rewarded for it. And you can carry forward that experience into something that looks good on your resume. And Saturn is placed in the 10th house of her chart in Capricorn. So being authority is what she has to do. She has to speak out. And what also backs that up is Jupiter is in conjunction to her midheaven as well. And I did a little bit of Facebook stalking on everybody I could here, and I saw that Lauren is a healer who has combined many different sorts of modalities into one, where she's even a hairstylist, where you see Uranus co-ruling the chart in the 6th house, conjunct the 7th house in Leo, the sign of the hair. You know, she could heal people through hairstyles, and it was one of her offerings. I think it was like some sort of cranial myofascial massage. And what I would see in her chart is, Saturn rules consolidation. When you offer so many different types of modalities to people, are you working yourself inefficiently and wearing yourself out, especially as you're approaching a second Saturn return, where you've got to learn how to work, not necessarily harder, because you're not, it's a second Saturn return. We're not 30 anymore. We're approaching 60. You've got to learn how to work more efficient and be while still maintaining authority in some way, being transitioning into more of a wise elder, passing on that Jupiter in the 9th conjunct the midheaven, passing on our wisdom of experience and a meaning, doing this work for the past how many ever years she's been doing it, and sharing it with other people in some sort of teaching capacity. I would imagine that her time's being very limited with work, career, probably not on. That's probably why she's not on this now. And part of being a authority is you've got to learn how to delegate work down and use your time more efficiently. And I would ask the question to Lauren, and she can always reach out to me or the group as well, see if this adds something to the group dynamic. Is she receiving recognition for all she's doing? I'd imagine, that's very important as well. That if you're doing all these jobs, is anybody seeing it? And what backs that up is, Chiron on the ascendant, it embodies this wounded healer archetype where other people are getting healing, but the healing might not be coming back towards me. I might not know how to heal myself. And with Pluto in the 7th house, when in a square to that Jupiter, I could imagine or sense some sort of, not imagine because it's right there, like a projection of a power dynamic in some way, where there could be a fear of letting go and claiming authority in that arena. And how did this, what did I write? I wrote a nice little thing about the Saturn and the 10th trine Pluto. Yeah, ultimately, by this time, if she's done it or not, only Lauren could assert that. But she needs to claim her authority as a healer of other people, of the people. With Saturn trine Pluto and Chiron conjunct the Aquarian ascendant. In whatever way that looks like, in the most efficient way. And that she could pass on her knowledge and be a mentor. And I plug her website. What's her website? I don't have it offhand, but look her up on Facebook, Lauren Pistache. She's a very accomplished woman. Has a lot of credentials, like a master's in Chinese medicine, and she's doing good things in the world. All right. I believe that's all I have. Any general questions if we have time for it? It's 6:17. I think we have a few minutes, Linda, right?
Yeah, we can have a few minutes. Yes, please go ahead if you have a question.
Yeah, so you were talking earlier about travel in Sagittarius, and I found it kind of interesting because recently there was some travel issues. There's a man that was beat up on a plane because he didn't want to get off because he'd bought a ticket, and they told him, "Oh, well, you have to go on the next flight." I just think that is sort of interesting that the karma is like playing out with this right now, especially since airlines are being put under scrutiny with what they're doing and why.
Oh yeah. You're absolutely right. Something that, especially, Pluto's going through Capricorn, and it's been highlighting how much the infrastructure, especially in America, is old and outdated. And it's like one of the few true things that, or occasionally true things that Donald Trump says, that the infrastructure in this country is kind of crappy. And when Saturn goes into Capricorn, all these deep underground changes are going to have to be made real in some way. And something I could say, right now for intercontinental travel, there's no sort of alternative to airlines, especially in America. But, if we're updating infrastructure, what could be like Warren Buffett is like a very great human being, and he owns so many rail companies. And I would imagine, he is so open to the idea of updating infrastructure. And if there's something fast, like a bullet train to compete with airlines, where you could actually have leg room and you could breathe and feel like a human being and not an animal on an airplane, I could definitely foresee that happening because it just makes good economic sense. There's a high demand for it. People invest their money into that. It could happen. In Europe, I don't think they have these type of issues traveling, intercontinentally within Europe. And it's pretty cheap as well. Like my wife's sister was staying in Rome, and it was like so cheap to go to all around Europe. It was just traveling to the U.S. with all these restrictions and rules that were just getting nutty and crazy.
I'm hoping for the Hyperloop system, but I don't know.
Maybe that's your generation. When your generation starts making the next Ubers.
Okay.
All right.
Any final questions or comments, and then we will have to wind down.
Hi, I just wanted to say I'm sorry I didn't give any feedback. I'm on my phone for the first time during this, and I couldn't figure out how to speak. I just found it.
Oh, nice. Were you here the whole time?
Yeah, I've been here the whole time. I was listening.
Okay. Do you want to?
Just about the job change. It's been on my mind for a long time, but I don't see it happening too soon. But it will happen in the next year or two.
Okay. And, I would just encourage you, with Sun Jupiter conjunction, in Virgo, get some space from the details in order to find that decision. And, you got to create space for it without being bogged down in the details, because it's just not in your nature to see it that way.
Yeah, definitely. Story of my life.
Yeah. And it happens to everybody. And, Saturn hits the ascendant. It's like, oh, I wake up and change, but the world sure as hell looks different. It can be very upsetting, especially for a Virgo who likes a particular order to things.
Yeah, but I have that Gemini moon in the 6th house, so I like a lot of change and a lot of flexibility. It's like a priority for me. So I do that kind of work that allows me that.
Oh, nice. Yeah. There he is, or she is. All right. And anything else, Robin?
No, you were spot on about the Venus. So I am at a time where I'm learning that I need to start paying more attention to myself. I've been putting too much of myself out for others and not giving enough energy to myself.
Mm. Yeah, with that grand water trine, you've got a lot to give, or a lot to. I don't think it would be you take away from people so much as you think you would. You know, it's like a self-sustaining system of nurturance. It's like the way I like to think of a grand water trine. You know a grand water trine,
Yeah, yeah. In the air houses.
right? Isn't that a fitting metaphor? It's like a nice mist. And that could be
Yeah.
Okay, would you all please thank Frederick Steinmann?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frederick.
Thanks so much. That was great.
Excellent.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. I look forward to doing you know, something in the future with you guys. This was
Definitely. Fantastic.
innovative. Works with my Uranus transit I've got going on, so I'm all for it.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good one, guys. Bye.